All right, everybody. Good evening. It is Tuesday night at 7 o'clock Central. So we know that means it's time for another Conversations with Commodores. And it is timely who my guest is this week. And you'll find out why in a few minutes. But I've got Scott O'Neill out of Nashville. Scott, how are you doing tonight, bud?
I'm doing great. It's been a pretty day here in Nashville and doing great.
Well, that's so good. I know it's been tough in Nashville the last 2 weeks. Just so many different bad things that have happened, but hopefully this week is starting off on a better note. We have Passover beginning tomorrow evening, then Easter's this weekend, and hopefully things are turning for the good, Scott. So I appreciate you making some time tonight.
Certainly hopeful Passover and Easter bring us some spring renewal on some of the craziness we've had going on. That is absolutely true.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear you. I was just in Nashville this weekend, guys, at the Georgia baseball series, and the Commodores look tough as usual, but the back half of the schedule is going to be really where the tough competition comes in, but they've got it rolling so far. And before I get started really with our conversation, I want to remind you guys that this Saturday afternoon is the spring game. It's going to be at the soccer lacrosse field or complex right behind McGugin. I put all of the sign-up links and all of the information in our group. So if you want to go and participate with the things that are going on, just sign up. And they've got all kind of stuff, including Chick-fil-A. They've got alumni gathering going on for football alums. So they hopefully can get as many folks out there for the scrimmage, which starts, I believe, at 5 p.m. Enough housekeeping. Let's get on to Scott O'Neill out of NBA. A Nashvilleian, makes his way from NBA over to campus. He's got an awesome story. But Scott, before we head back to the early 80s, gosh, we're getting a little older, aren't we? Tell folks about your life these days. What's going on in the current version of Scott O'Neill?
Early 80s, that's just scary, isn't it? I was talking to a friend of mine today, actually. We were talking NBA, not Vanderbilt. So now I'm talking Vanderbilt. So it's kind of a great day. We were talking NBA, and my 40th reunion is next spring. And for those of y'all remember the White Animals at Exit In a few months ago, last fall, before the Exit In closed, we were all hanging out and going to the White Animals. Like everybody in that room was 1980s Vanderbilt, NBA, BGA, St. Cecilia, Harpeth Hall. And a group of us said, look, our reunion's coming up. We're going to go ahead and start planning this 2 years out. And so, yeah, it feels interesting talking about the early 80s. I went into the flower business, our family business, for a little while, but then I was back at NBA for 14 years as director of alumni development, and then the athletic director, which was tons of fun for 14 years. I then moved into the foundation world. I was at the community foundation, and now I'm at the Jewish Foundation, Jewish Federation of Middle Tennessee, Greater Nashville right now. And spend a lot of time on the farm as much as I can. We raise a few horses, raise some cows, and play around out here in Columbia now. That's as far away as I've ever lived from Nashville. And we spent my entire, I joke, I spent my entire educational career in about a 6-mile stretch of West End Avenue. But this is far out as we've ever been. But that's it now. But still in town practically every day. But 4 or 5 days a week for sure.
Well, Scott, speaking of that 6-mile stretch on West End Avenue, as often as I get to Nashville, which is 3 or 4 times, 5 times a year for various functions, sports, etc., it never ceases to amaze how built up the campus has really developed in the last, say, 10 years. When you go on West End, where the Carmichael Towers, rest in peace, used to be, there's now these massive structures. And I know that there are these mini campuses, if you will, but it looks so different. And I don't mean to be so nostalgic, but when Rotiers and all of that is gone, and it just, I guess, for the sake of progress, if you will. And then I went downtown, and here's my rookie move. Saturday night, I went downtown. Now, I was going downtown for an art crawl where all the museums or art galleries are. I guess that would be to the west of Broadway, but the curiosity got the better of me. And I walked down to Broadway, and I did a 180 and walked straight back. It was just so many people. It's unreal.
Well, back in our,
That's
talking
not,
about
and
this,
the reason I bring it up, that's not from our time period. This is the
no,
current
no,
Nashville.
no, no. I mean, back in our time, we didn't go to Lower Broad. I mean,
Mm,
you didn't go to Lower Broad, and I don't want to say anything racy or anything, but that was not a place you went,
yeah.
and now it's not a place you go, but for a totally different reason. Now it's
Mm-hmm.
just I get caught every so often. It's been a few years now, but I get caught every so often where somebody will say, "Oh, we want to go honky tonk, and we're in town. Will you come on down and go down with us?" And the last time, probably 5-6 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I'll never forget standing on the corner of, there Fifth and Broad, before there was that new complex at Fifth and Broad, standing
Right.
on the corner of Fifth and Broad at 2:30 in the morning, looking at my watch going, why am I here? And I told him, I said, I got one more honky tonk, and then
Yeah.
we're out of here.
Well,
You're right. It is a total, you can be in places now, somebody could blindfold you and take you there and go, I'm not in Nashville. I don't even know my way out of here.
Scott, that's what I was going to say, and I'll get off of this, but it was also a Predators home game Saturday night. So that added, another 15,000 people or whatever it holds. But we were crossing the street with 200 people. It was like New York Times in sheer volume. I mean, good for Nashville, good for tourism, but I have relearned my lesson in how to fill. Let's get back to you, Scott, and talking about how did you talk about it? We can stay on this a little bit. Talk about growing up in Nashville and going to MBA and then eventually finding your way, because you found a curious route, and we're going to talk about the weight room in a minute, but you had a curious route getting to Vanderbilt. So
Yeah,
talk a little bit about growing up in Nashville.
Well, Nashville is certainly a small town when I was growing up. I mean, and for those others around on this call, back in 70s and 80s, Nashville was a big small town. That's really all you can say. And it's a different place now of being the it city, or at least the it city for bachelorette parties. But I grew up at Vanderbilt. I mean, my dad had season tickets from the time basketball and football from the time I was a toddler. We sat on the back row in Memorial Gym, and we had this little nook, and right behind our seat was a little space between the wall, and we'd throw all our coats there. And I was so little that I didn't make it through the second half. I fell asleep behind the bench there on the coats, when I was little. And then Vanderbilt game, the football games, I went from the time I could walk into the stadium and my dad didn't leave. And it didn't make any difference who we were playing. It didn't make any difference what the score was. We didn't leave until the game was over, and we tailgated before and we tailgated after. And it was just a part of my upbringing. And one of the things that it was so beautiful about my experience, it being a young fan and a growing fan, was from the time I was at least in middle school, maybe late elementary school, through high school, and then after graduation for years after that, our seats were next to Bill Wade, and I always got to sit next to Bill Wade and listen to him regale the stories of Vanderbilt football and NBA football, Vanderbilt football, and then Chicago Bears. And of course, the Chicago Bears were doing great in the 80s then. And it was just a wonderful time. And I just grew to love Vanderbilt, grew to love football. And I had to do it. It was all I wanted to do was play football and play football at Vanderbilt. Now, for those of you who know me, it never really happened that way, but it was all I wanted to do. And my circuitous route was, I was a sophomore at MBA, and back in whatever that was, 82, 81, 82, whatever it was, we didn't have much of a weight room. Not a lot of high schools didn't have much of a weight room at that point. And I had a buddy who was a year ahead of me and good football player, David Maddox, whose dad was a star linebacker at Vanderbilt. And David went on and played at Rhodes. And he and I drove down, and we said, we're gonna see if they'll let us lift in the Vanderbilt weight room. We were kind of muscle heads and did everything we could. And we walked in, like we were big ass Pete, and walked into Doc Crease. And we said, hey, we want to work out here. And he looked at us down his nose and paused for a little bit. And he goes, okay. He goes, you come in here every afternoon, you clean the weight room, you sweep, you clean the mirrors, you clean the chalk up. And when you're done, you can work out. And he goes, but you come every day, you don't miss. and you can work out. And that's what I did for 3 years. For 3 years, while I was in high school, I showed up 4 or 5 days a week, whatever he told me to, and I swept the floors and I cleaned the mirrors and cleaned everything, put the dumbbells back in order, and then I got to work out.
Hmm. Well, let me pause you right there. I want to jump back about two things that you mentioned. For those who don't know who Bill Wade was, and his importance to the Vanderbilt program, Scott, share just a little bit of your experience and who he was. Now, unfortunately, he's no longer with us, but
No, he's not. And I got to know him then as a young person, as a young middle schooler, high schooler, and then afterwards. And then when I got back to NBA, he was a distinguished alum. He'd had an illustrious career at NBA, went on to Vanderbilt, had a great career, went to Chicago Bears, and unless I'm badly mistaken, they won a championship while he was there. And he was the Joe Namath of that era. I mean, he was. I guess I'm kind of guessing now that must have been about the 50s. I guess in his career, and maybe early 60s, but early 60s probably in the pros. And Bill was just a giant of NBA, Vanderbilt, NFL football. I mean, he was the star, and he also had just an incredible way of teaching. I mean, he for years he would see these young people outside games playing touch football and teach them, here's how you hold the ball, here's how you throw the ball, let me teach. And I sat next to him for years and years and years, maybe a decade or better, at least a decade or better, and just listening to him teach football. And just a genuinely kind, amazing man, and always willing to give back to the community, all of his communities. I mean, but a stunningly good football player in that era, that pre-NFL-ish, star era. I mean, but an amazing man and an amazing athlete.
he was the #1 draft pick in the NFL in 1952 by the LA Rams. Went into the military for a couple of years, then played for the Rams for 6 years, played for the Bears for 6 or so years, was the championship quarterback for the Bears in 1963. He's considered really one of the 100 greatest football players by many. He threw for 18,000 yards. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but you're right. He was the SEC most valuable player in all America. I mean, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So he really, even though he's now been gone since 2016, he's largely considered maybe the greatest Vanderbilt Commodore, at least professionally speaking. But that is so unique for you to have that experience and to appreciate who it was you were hanging out with during your childhood.
Oh, it was unbelievable. And, and of course, my dad would say, that's Bill Wade, that's Bill Wade. And it took me a while, as a young person, middle schooler, high schooler, figure it out. And probably, I just loved it because this man was teaching me football and was telling me fabulous stories. Mm-hmm. And then later on realized I sat next to Bill Wade for years. And the reason we quit sitting, we quit sitting next to each other, which I thought was fascinating. He moved to the end zone. And as he got older, he moved to the end zone, and the horseshoe end of the end zone, because he says, I can't see the play develop from here. And he wanted to be able to get behind the play and be able to see the play develop. And I thought that's just a true lover of the game and student of the game. And
God, it is. It's
I used to go see him and just go sit there, listen for a while, and then go back to my seat.
It's a quarterback thing.
That's a quarterback thing. You would know that.
Film from that angle the whole career. I enjoy sitting in the end zone, so you can see the splits, you can see the lineups and all of that. That's awesome. Awesome. We got some Commodores in the house. I need to welcome OJ Fleming. Had an awesome lunch with OJ on Sunday with his lovely family. We got Mad Dog in the house. Mark Matlock is with us.
I remember some weight room time with that man.
I bet you did. I bet. Now, Scott, talk a little bit about, let's stay with NBA. You're coming over and hanging out and learning about the Doc Crease world in your sophomore, junior, and senior years. And all this time you're at NBA, you're right down the street, you're playing your sports, you're doing your thing. At what point did it develop in your mind during your high school years, or maybe even before that Vanderbilt was going to be where you were going to go after high school?
Oh, it was always the place I wanted to be, where I wanted to go, and, I was lucky enough to play well enough to, have Coach Mack come see me a couple of times. Lynn Amity, Bob Stanley came and saw me. And so I was lucky enough to get a little interest and know that, okay, well, maybe this could work out. But, honestly, I was going, I was going one way or the other. So that's just kind of the way it worked out. And, I had a little bit of interest. They were coming and talking and watching games, and I had a terrible senior year. I had mono before my senior year started. Came back in right before, a week or so before the school year started, before the season started. Actually, it was a first or second scrimmage, I think. Had a little knee injury. Had to have a scope on my knee. Missed the first 3 or 4 games. First game I was back, blew it out, and it was done. And so, and it was a bad, I joke all the time. Everybody says they had a terrible knee injury. Oh, I had a terrible knee injury. Well, I had knee replacement at 47. So I got a little bit of proof that I had a terrible knee injury, but I still wanted to play. And Coach Mack said, come on over and give it a shot, see what happens. And I was going to do it, so I see what I can do. If I can run and lift this thing back into playability, let's see if I can do it. And, I'll tell the ending real quick. I didn't. I played a little bit of rugby and tried to see if I could get it, lifted my butt off in the weight room, but it just never came back to where I could play. And so I ended up, being a part by working in the weight room, working with Doc's crew and in the weight room, working with Brad Bates's crew in the weight room. And that was my way of being a part and giving back and serving the team, and wouldn't trade it for anything. It was, it was a way to be a part and stand on those sidelines every Saturday and be a part of the whole thing. So it's kind of a circuitous route, and I would have loved to have played, but it was also a way for me to be a part and be a part of the program that I'd loved since I was a kid.
Scott, did any, and remind me, you've had other family members who went to Vanderbilt, but who else went besides yourself in the past?
My mom went to Vanderbilt, and my wife went to Vanderbilt. Her father went to Vanderbilt. Her grandfather went to Vanderbilt. So it's a Vanderbilt family. My dad would have gone to Vanderbilt if he'd gone anywhere. My dad was from that crew of, went to work when he was 14, and people used to ask him, Cleve, why'd you quit school and go to work when you're 14? And he goes, got used to eating. And but he was one of that crew, but it was always a dream of his, and a place that he saw the power in Nashville, the power of what it had done for this community, the people that it had produced for this community. So, it was a dream of his that I would go there. And I ended up following in, one side of my family's footsteps, but maybe not his side of the family.
Well, I knew that various families, either through marriage or through blood, had gone there, and you and I knew each other a little bit back in the day, and I always thought very, very highly of you and Anna Jean. But the one thing I questioned was your choice of friendships, and he's not on here right now. I love Kathy Barsh Newman, but that John Newman fella, I always just kept him at arm's length because you never knew what he was thinking. And I knew that you guys were close back in the day.
If you wanted to hang around Kathy, you had to hang around John.
Well, so, that's exactly right.
That was, but no, you know what? John and I both suffer from exactly the same problem. We both married so far over our heads that we outkicked our coverage, and so to hang out with Anna Jane and to hang out with Kathy, you had to hang out with John and Scott, and that's just the way it was. No, they're fabulous friends. They were in our wedding, we were in their wedding. And it's been a fabulous friendship, and they're in Jacksonville and we're in Nashville, but whenever we can, I should have, when you asked me for pictures to send you, I should have found that picture from just a few years ago, actually right before the COVID shutdown. We saw Kathy and John, sitting in our living room, and there was a nice little picture of us all on the couch. But
oh, nice. I will say this, as I was also at the Newman wedding, the historical Newman wedding, back in, I think, a summer of 90, maybe, or 91. That may be the largest wedding I've ever been part of, with two just powerful Jacksonville families. You remember, we were seating hundreds of people, but it was a beautiful affair. But we could go down the Newman rabbit hole another time. I want to talk about
let me say one Newman rabbit hole I need to publicly apologize to Kathy for when John and Kathy were leaving the wedding. John's brother and I were on stage with the band singing Fine Young Cannibals. And I just want to go ahead and apologize for that now and get that out of the way. So,
boy, if that doesn't put a date right there, the Fine Young Cannibals, what a great band in the 80s and 90s. Scott, you had the unique opportunity to be part of the Doc Crease administration and then the Brad Bates administration in the mid to late 80s. When I came in the fall of 86, Coach Bates was already in place, but he had only been in place for about a year, maybe a year and a half. Talk a little bit about Doc Crease and then talk about how different the Coach Bates era was, because I know they were unique individuals and they had completely different, at least my observation, completely different approaches about strength, conditioning, and so forth with their athletes.
Yeah, it's one of the greatest gifts that I had in my entire, I'll say professional career. I was a student and I was, working through school doing it, but it was a huge part of my life. And Doc came from that powerlifting, squat, power clean, Olympic lifting, bench press world, move a lot of weight, a lot of strength, a lot of power, a lot of explosion. And Brad and produced tremendous athletes, tremendous offensive linemen, tremendous running backs, just a powerhouse of a strength and conditioning coach, and lots of fabulous strength coaches that came from the program. Jeff Madden's on here. I mean, tremendous coach and coach of coaches and teacher of coaches. And it was and the exposure to some of the greatest power lifters in the country, the exposure to some fabulous Olympic lifters that came into that weight room. And lots and lots of people, I told you a story the other day, lots and lots of people came to that weight room to participate in that. And then you fast forward and Brad Bates comes in. Brad and I had exactly 30 minutes together one summer before he walked in the door. We had 30 minutes to talk, and then we walked into the first football workout of the summer. And high intensity manual, failure, things to every body part to failure, high intensity, manual resistance, so you can't lift your arms up after shoulder flies, and an incredible strength endurance, and came from that world of Nautilus Midwest, Gittleson at Michigan, who was a PhD in exercise physiology that Bo Schembechler had handpicked from the professor ranks to come run the strength and conditioning program on a very scientific cellular level. It was night and day, but the one thing they both had was an incredible work ethic, an incredible connection to the athletes, and also a demand of that hard work and that time put in and no excuses in the weight room. And so they were a lot alike in that, just the actual exercises in the weight room, the actual, lifts that were done were different, but no less tremendous outcomes for sure.
I've got two, I guess let's take the Doc Crease era first.
Okay.
Being in Nashville, being in such a visible campus, Vanderbilt is in a unique position to sometimes host major stars in different worlds, whether it's music or TV or movies or whatever it is. But you have a great story that I want you to share that I think just fits that to a T. So you got to set the stage and share that story.
So everybody can imagine, 7 o'clock, 7:30, 8 in the morning on a Saturday morning in college is kind of like, 3 in the morning these days. I mean, it's been a long week, probably been out the night before or whatever. And I get this phone call on our landline in our dorm room. And back obviously before cell phones, my phone in our dorm room rings. I jump up out of bed, I answer it. And Doc always called me Bubba. Don't know. Nobody else ever called me Bubba, but Doc always do. Bubba, get over here. I need you to work out with somebody. And, Doc said jump. And I was already jumping, not even asking how high. And pulled on sweats and baseball cap or whatever and ran over to the weight room. And that McGugan weight room door was always unlocked. And I ran down the hall and hit that door and it was locked. And I was like, good Lord. Pulled out my key, unlocked the door, went in. And so I walked in the door. Doc said, hey, lock that door behind you. So I locked the door behind me. He goes, go back and work out with that fella in the back. Take him through whatever he wants to do whatever he needs, help him out, get a workout in. So we proceed to do everything. If we benched, we did chest flies, and then we went down. I mean, we did every body part, major muscle groups, solo muscle group. We worked out for 3.5 hours. I mean, it was just an intense workout. And during the conversation, good guy was working out with, small guy, but lean, muscular, strong for his size. And he's like, I just never know when I'm going to get in a weight room like this or get around, a place like this. And so I want to do everything I can. And I'm like, absolutely, we did everything. Dumbbells, barbells, squats, what you name. We did everything. We finished the workout, and of course I'm working on probably less sleep than I care to admit. And finish, shake hands, and he walks out the door, and I walk into Doc's office and just kind of fall on the chair, and and he goes, he's got this big, everybody knows this, that laugh, big grin on his face. And he goes, how was that? And I go, and I just kind of said, that's fine. It was good. He goes, looked at me, goes, how was the workout? How'd he do? And I go, he's pretty good. He did good for you. And the smile went off his face, and he looked at me and goes, you don't know who that was. And I go, no. And he goes, that was the boss. And I promise you, I looked at him and I said, who's boss? He goes, the boss. That was Bruce Springsteen. I go, oh. And in my defense, he was wearing, Bruce is not a big guy. He's wearing like double extra large sweats. He's got on, wrestling shoes. They're taped at the ankle and baggy. He's got on gloves. He's got on a hoodie. And I'm like, okay, all right, great. And, but, here I was working out for 3.5 hours with Bruce Springsteen and not paying enough attention, but, just screaming at him to get the last rep in on the bench press.
That it just gives you a little glimpse into his world as to how and why at age 73, he still puts on 3.5 hour shows all the time. Crazy, isn't it?
Well, and I heard the story afterwards. He even before. I don't know how much he lifts anymore, but he goes through an hour of vocal workout, an hour of stretching, an hour of guitar. I mean, he preps. I mean, and he has an incredible work ethic. And I was joking the other day. You look at some pictures, he looks like Woody Allen instead of Bruce Springsteen, but he can still do it. He can still rock and roll. And awesome. But I'm telling you, it's embarrassing. It's like, people tell you, tell me who's famous, touch with fame, who have you met? And I can't even say I met him. I mean, I worked out with him for 3.5 hours, but I didn't even know who it was. I couldn't even ask him about anything. I don't even know anything. I just know, the guy lifted okay.
Awesome. Speaking of work ethics, thank you for that great story. We're with Scott O'Neill, but we got Jimmy Arnold in the house. Hey, Jim, thanks for joining us tonight, as always.
Speaking Scott, of NFL star from our conversation with
absolutely.
Bill Wade earlier.
Scott, you go from the Doc Crease era, you get into the Brad Bates, and I'm going to call it the new era, the new way of strength and conditioning. You're one of the few who can talk in earnest about the St. Valentine's Day massacre. And I hope you remember that horrible event the rest of us had to go through. Does that ring a bell with you?
It rings a bell, but there were so many of them. I mean, there were so many. For those whoever remembers, somebody out there is bound to remember, the pushing the Blazer, and this was an old K5 Blazer back in the day, all the way up the new parking garage next to the stadium club.
That's what this is.
Was that a part of that day?
Yeah, that was that day, and
it was insane.
That's with Dwayne Jones putting extra weights in the trunk. That's with Dwayne Jones forgetting to take the park brake off or switching between the park brake and the regular brake on and off. It was just that different approach of way of getting guys to give their best. And it was unique. It was different. It was stuff that we're still talking about more than 30 years later.
Oh, absolutely. And those you guys remember Marvin Thomas, who was Adonis. I mean, the guy had a build like he could have competed in Mr. Olympia. But Marvin had I mean, he was strong as all get out, but he had kind of a plateau. He kind of plateaued, and it was like, what are we going to do to get over this plateau? And I think Marvin went maybe 2 or 3 weeks one summer, maybe even a month, where he didn't touch a weight. I mean, literally, it was buckets of sand, running in that sand pit up the ramp behind the weight room, climbing the tower, taking buckets of sand up to the top of the coach's tower, and bringing them back down one arm at a time. So Brad had a way, because I mean, I'll never forget the way he described it. He goes, the body doesn't know if it's a Nautilus machine, if it's a hammer machine, if it's a barbell, if it's a dumbbell. The body just knows that it's been stressed. The muscle just knows it's been stressed, and it's been stressed to a point of, I think he used to say it's been stressed to a point that it's been torn down, and it knows if we don't get better, it's going to die on a cellular level. On that cellular level, if the muscle doesn't get better, we're going to die. And so whether it was pushing cars or tug of war, or with 45-pound plates in your hands running the stadiums. I mean, whatever it was that intensity and that fight. And there was such a fight in that crew. All of them. I joked around all the time. People would say Brad had, Joel Blanc, who was a graduate student at Divinity School, and had Bob Long, who was an undergraduate with us, and I was an undergrad, and that was our team. And one of my responsibilities, I worked with the women's basketball team for a while. And I used to joke, they said, why did you work out the women's basketball team? I said, I got first choice. But but it was, how do you do things? Well, we go out and run 400s, and they're like, well, why are we running 400s? Or Patsy asked me one time, Patsy Smith said, my calves are small. Will you make my calves bigger? Well, that was a mistake. I mean, asking me to work out your calves for a month to get your calves bigger, that was a mistake. I'd jump up on her back, and she'd have to do heel raises on the step with me in the dumbbell room. So it didn't make any difference. It was just that level of intensity, that level of, and sometimes I think it was purely, man, look what I did. That almost seemed impossible, and look what I did.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Even though from a physical standpoint, you couldn't compete on the field, did being in the weight room somehow fulfill that competitiveness that you still had internally as an athlete?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I was a musclehead. I wanted to get stronger. I wanted to, do crazy things, and, and be able to tell the crazy stories of lifting and, fitness stuff we did. But it really filled me to be a part of those teams, and to see, and even stretching guys before the game, I felt like, hey, I'm doing a part. To fast forward to my athletic director world at NBA, you're talking to high school students, and maybe they're not getting as much playing time as they want, and maybe they're not. It's like, what? If you're that scout team nose guard, and you're wearing that starting center out all week long, you're a part of that win on Friday night. And I kind of look at it the same way. I mean, if I could do everything I could to train, get somebody in shape, stretch them before the game, work on flexibility, whatever it was, I felt like I was a part. I mean, I'm a small part, but I felt like I was a part. So I couldn't play, but it was a way to be a part of that Commodore program that I'd watched since I was a kid, and feel like I was a part, and meet some great people, and be a part of. We didn't win championships, but everybody cared, and everybody was there for each other. It was a powerful group for all those years. We all did it, and we all overlapped in different ways. And but yeah, that was certainly a part of it. How can you be a part of a program and give it your all if you can't go out there and make the tackle or get the first down or whatever? Absolutely.
A college football program is clearly not just made up of the 85 scholarships and the 115 or so players on the roster. There's so many other roles, whether you're a trainer or equipment manager, a GA, a graduate assistant coach, whatever your role is, you're part of the team. And I think one of the hardest things for athletes who can't compete on the field of play anymore is to transition into whatever that next role may be, if they still desire to be part of the bigger team. A lot of athletes, Scott, that we know, and we know their stories, when they get hurt and they don't bounce back to where they were, they close off that entire part of their life. And it becomes a really bad chapter, if you will, unless they deal with it. And this is a long way of saying you didn't allow that to happen. In fact, you turned it into the next phase or the next chapter, for lack of a better word, and then went on to utilize that. So while you're an undergraduate, Scott, and doing all of this, did it dawn on you at any point? I know that your family still had the floral business, but did it percolate to you that maybe this would become a full-time career at some point? Did that ever come to mind?
Sure. Oh, absolutely. It's a really, it's a story we all hear, late in my spring of my senior year at Vanderbilt. My dad lost a couple of key employees. So even while I was, still in school, I was going over there and helping out and trying to get them through busy spring season. Of course, then we graduate and it's Mother's Day and wedding season, and the flower business, that's a big deal. And so I kind of, I was kind of already doing it. And, I guess in my head, I was like, let's get through this May and June busy time of the year, and I'll see what happens. And, really somewhere around that time, Brad Bates called me and said, without mentioning, so-and-so is looking for an assistant strength coach. Are you interested? And I was very interested, but, it was one of those, family business kind of need and help out kind of thing. And I hung around for 12 years, and I thought I'd be there a year or so, and I hung around for 12. When we sold that business, I kind of felt like it was my time to get back into it. And I used to joke with Coach Owen, my high school football coach. I always thought I'd be an English teacher and a high school football coach. So I thought, well, maybe that's the time. Maybe this is the time to do it. I still never really did that, but I went back to MBA and I did coach middle school. I did coach track. I did coach in the weight room. I had a little experience in the weight room, so I coached in the weight room for those years. And then in 2007 or so, I guess, I became athletic director. And, I kind of felt like that was really where I belonged. I mean, it really felt like guiding a program, an entire athletic program in scholastic sports. And John Newman does that. We were talking about John a little bit ago. John, has been a part of that. And, it's a different world these days. And I consider myself a dinosaur. I think scholastic sports are about teaching, and they're about team, and they're about doing something for the team, not for yourself. And they're about putting the team's needs over and above your own. And that was the type of program we ran. We wanted to, we wanted 2 and 3 sport athletes. And this is an era of year-round, year-round sports, and we mandated it. And like I said, I think I'm a dinosaur, but I really felt like we had the success, not just, and we did win some championships, but not just on that level, but on young men becoming the types of men we wanted them to be through sports. And that it's always been that for me. It's always been about did you give as much as you could? Did you do your part? Did you bring it every day? It's that Season of Life book that many of us have read. Did you bring the 7? If you could bring the 7, or if you could bring the 9, did you bring a 6? I mean, it's all about giving what you can. And so I felt like that was kind of full circle for me. That was the full circle and where I wanted to be. And in a lot of ways, that was kind of the peak of all of that time I spent at Vanderbilt doing what I did. Is how do we now translate this into another generation of athletes? I used to tell them all the time, guys, there's 115 or so that graduate every year here, and 2 or 3 go D1 every year. 2 or 3. Now we have a lot of guys go at different levels, and a lot of guys go on and play multiple different sports at a lot of places, but 1 or 2 or 3 out of 115 are going to go, D1. And, that's not the reason to do it. The reason to do it is because you love the game, you love your teammates, and it's a great experience.
That's that 2%.
Absolutely.
I've heard
Absolutely.
it many, many times that out of high school, about 2% of the athletes who want to go to the next level, play in college, end up on the D1 level, when in reality, there is hundreds, if not thousands, of more opportunities at the levels other than D1. But speaking of playing sports, when we were kids, probably your experience too, Scott, was I played the sport of the season.
Absolutely.
You know, you go from baseball into the fall, which is football, leads you back into basketball, then, you know, rotate into the next year. And I think that a lot of coaches, particularly in the last 15 or 20 years, they like that. They don't want those athletes who just concentrate on, for example, being a baseball pitcher all year, because they wear out those body parts. It leads to surgeries younger and younger. So I'm glad to hear that that's been at least during your years, was the model of multi-sports being emphasized, if you will.
Well, it's still, I mean, even now you hear the percentages each year of these athletes taken into the NFL, and how many of them were 2 and 3 sport athletes. I mean, it's the repetitive use injuries. It's the working different body parts. It's, you know, I think at the high school level, it's being a starter on one team and riding the bench on the other, and learning what it means to serve the team, and learning what it means. Or even if you are a starter on both, maybe one's more. I mean, being a part of different teams around different people, it exposes you to a different level of competition or a different level of participation. And, that's why we do it. I mean, like you say, the 1%ers to the NFL, the 2%ers to the NCAA Division I. I mean, we do it because we love we love the sport. We love to play. We love being a part of the team. We love the locker room time. You know what? You got to love the weight room time. You got to love the training time. And you may not love it while you're doing it, but looking back on it, it's a part of it. And if we can get away from the stardom or the glory, or seeking the glory, it is that 1 or 2% that get that, but so many more love the game and love the experience and love being a part of it. And miss I know OJ, if he's still on here, knows that, Kenny Chesney did that song around a BGA football team. And, you just love the locker room. And when you play that last game, you're going to miss the locker room. You're going to miss walking out on that Friday night again. And, I think that song says a lot of why we all do it. We didn't do it because of the glory. We did it because of the camaraderie and the team and the effort and the all for one for all kind of thing, if it's as corny as that is.
And I want to welcome Greg Simmons. Hey, Greg, need to get you on the show sometime. Guys, I've got Scott O'Neill. Scott was part of Doc Crease and Brad Bates's strength and conditioning staffs in the 80s. And you're so right about what that song stands for, because Scott, I would say 100% of the people that I've asked the following to have said just that. The thing they miss the most is the fellas, is the teammates, are the laughs, the memories, the being in the trenches. The scoreboard may not always have a W up there, but it's the journey that gets you to the Friday nights in high school, the Saturdays in college. And that's where I want to kind of steer the next part to, is those are fond memories for most of us who were at Vanderbilt or your college years, because it's a little bit more innocent, a little bit less responsibilities. It's that 18 to 22 time period. You're figuring out who you are and what you want in life. And you may or may not find it then, figure it out then. But what was it about your years at Vanderbilt that you look back that are your most fond memories, or things that just kind of came to some clarity for you back in those times?
That's a great question. That's a great question. Kind of hard to think about, because I met my wife.
You could better have answered that number one, my friend.
Met my wife there on the third day of college, and I tell her all the time, she kicked me to the curb for a while, and then we got back together late that year. But but certainly that, great friendships and great mentors. My son's name's Bates, and you can figure out why. Meeting great, just dedicated, wonderful people, and still the stories. I mean, Jim Arnold and I've told stories, about the Doc Crease years, and then reliving some of those times in the Brad Bates weight room. I mean, we went on this trip with when Brad was trying to teach us his methodology. Bob and I'd come out of the Doc Crease weight room, and Joel had come out of Penn State, or and it was just a difference. So he was like, "We're going to take a little trip," and so we hopped in a Suburban and we drove up to Cincinnati, and we got to Nautilus Midwest, and we worked out in the Kong room. Every piece of equipment that Nautilus ever made was in this weight room on the top floor called the Kong room. We worked out on that, and then we went up to Michigan, and we were the guest strength coaches for Mike Gittleson, and meeting Mike Gittleson, this larger than life guy who was a PhD in physiology. And Bo Schembechler had said, "I want you to be my strength and conditioning coach." And he goes, "I don't know anything about strength and conditioning." He goes, "You're exercise physiology, you're a PhD in physiology." And he created an incredible program. And we got to go up there and coach with him for like the last 4-day weekend before they broke for their summer break. And what we learned there, and that's where we kind of learned the whole Brad Bates, Mike Gittleson mantra of the workout's over when you throw up. It's like
Side note. That's where Coach Bates had to have come up with SMA.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And SMA stands for sick mental attitude. And he had shirts that if you threw up, you got a shirt.
Most of with that crazy character, drawn on the shirt, and then sent the Christmas card, the winter break card, or
Andy McCarroll throwing
up off the leg extension machine.
That's right.
Yeah, that's exactly where it came from. Here's where it came from. So we finished working out the Michigan football team. Mm-hmm. I ran this stick workout on the treadmill with Jumbo Elliott, and I thought I was going to die. And here's this guy, 310 pounds, just kicking my ass on a treadmill interval workout. We finished this workout, and Gittleson says, "Okay, now we're going to go work out." 2 or 3 of his assistants, Mike, Brad, Joel, Bob, and I, and he gets us. We jump in the back of his little pickup truck. We drive over, and Mike carried this man bag. I mean, he was a Clint Eastwood looking tough guy, but he carried this man bag, and he gets out of the truck and he walks up to this little steep hill, goes up to the top and sets a bottle of tequila on the top of the hill. And he goes, "Okay, one at a time, sprint up the hill, take a swig, run back down. Then the next person, run up the hill, take a swig, come back down." And he goes, "One who throws up first wins, not loses, wins." And I'm just happy to say I didn't win. I kind of wished I had at one point. It maybe would have quit sooner. But that's where that whole thing came from. It is this, I mean, it was fun and it was funny, but it was taxing yourself to, it was that old, the whole Walter Payton story. Well, Walter Payton taped up his knees and his ankles and his cleats and ran up that crazy hill behind his house. And he knew, and when he threw up, he ran one more. I mean, it was that crazy, but that's exactly where that stuff came from. And it was just a different time. I was visiting with a military friend of my daughter's recently, and he was saying that now in the military, in the training, they have a little card in their pocket, and if they feel like they've been pushed too hard, or drill sergeant or whatever, that they can pull the card out and they get a break. They get a little break. There wasn't no breaks back in the Brad Bates weight room. I mean, you just kept on going until we came out one end or the other, I guess, or you finished. But it was certainly, we went on Saturday mornings. This was my introduction after maybe a week or so to Brad. He walked in, we had about 30 minutes. We worked out the team for the first time. And then maybe that Saturday, maybe 2 Saturdays later, he started at 9 a.m. on Saturday mornings. The 4 of us went over to the track, and we ran a 4x400 relay, and we had to break 4 minutes. And keeping in mind that one of us was 310-pound former offensive lineman Bob Long, who gave it his all, and we made Brad Bates run the final leg because we knew he was probably going to make up whatever time we messed up. But that you talk about sick mental attitude. I mean, we lived it ourselves. So, and that was another crazy thing if you think about it. He was not going to put the team through any workout he and we had not done.
Mhm.
I mean, he was like, we're going to
No,
experience it. He was not going to put the team through anything he and we had not done.
guys, I'm talking with Scott O'Neill, and he's sharing some awesome behind the scenes stories during his time with Doc Crease and with Brad Bates. And Scott, what I'm hearing from you is it was hard work, but it was fun to be with these guys and to push yourselves and to push your limits and to get the athletes, whether it was the women's basketball program or the football, whatever team it was, through these workouts to make them better off the field and as well as on the field. Now, I remember a different graduate assistant, and his name is not coming to mind, but he wrote a paper, and I still have that somewhere, that he said the transition from being a college athlete where you are at your very best physical peak condition is not going to be that way unless you become a professional athlete. But for the 99.9% of us, when we transitioned to whatever our next stage in life, our professions, our families, and those kind of life milestones, you have to learn how to transition out of being that college athlete of lifting and eating so many calories and working out to the rest of life. So here's, and I'm sorry for being so long-winded. How was your transition out of the weight room life, out of the former football player life to your post-college, going back and working in your family business and then MBA and then going forward? How was your transition? Because I know of linemen who've lost 100 pounds. I know of receivers who gained 100 pounds. You know, we don't all transition the right direction, and sometimes it's tough. How did you manage that?
Yeah, I think it is hard. You know, I remain competitive for a long time in my own way. I mean, actually, Brad Bates and I played doubles tennis for about 10 years together. And that was an outlet. That was a way to go, you know, run your butt off and compete and play your butt off and do that. And that was a lot of fun, but there was a competitive piece. You know, I didn't like losing. I mean, I didn't like losing. And I think the turning point for me, I was probably, maybe we played for 10 or 12 years. I was 33, 34 years old, and I saw somebody later at dinner that night, and they said, "Oh, I saw you played on court 7 today." And I said, "Well, how'd you not play on court 7?" "Well, we saw your broken racket in the trash can." You know, so that's when I realized maybe I had to calm down a little bit. Maybe I had to settle it down just a little bit. So yeah, I think it's important to find those outlets. And you know, we all were in an era of maybe I would say the beginnings of the fitness craze in a lot of ways. I mean, the 80s was the launch of Aerobics Alive and all the crazy stuff. So I think, you know, keeping that physical piece of it is important because it's an outlet. You have to get rid of that. You have to get rid of that energy, and you have to stay there and expend some of that. And I think that's really important. But the competition's hard. I mean, you know, you want to win, and putting that away sometimes. I think finding another outlet, and you know, I don't know that I ever found another outlet. I'm still plenty competitive, but I've tried to calm down and not break tennis rackets anymore. But I'll never forget that. That's when I kind of thought, well, maybe I need to calm. Maybe I dial it back just a little bit if people are recognizing that broken racket's mine.
Well, Scott, that's, you know, when you have that competitive fire that's just part of your DNA, for a lot of people, it never goes away.
Oh, no.
But the key is figuring out, how do I channel that competitiveness and not tear my Achilles or my hamstring? Or, you know, you gotta, as you transition in life in the different age demographics, you need to figure out what's age appropriate for you.
That's
and
right.
and sometimes that's a hard lesson. I'm still playing pickup basketball a couple of days a month, but I don't chase the 25 and 30-year-olds. I chase the guys who are within a few years of
That's
me.
right. That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah, you can't do it as much anymore. We have horses and we ride, and I always say I want the one with brakes. I mean, I don't want to come off. I don't heal up as fast as I used to, and and it's hard to put that stuff down sometimes. You still want to be the one who can do the unthinkable or do the crazy, but you don't heal quite as fast. So
No, you don't bounce back, but that was going to lead me to the next or the last thing I was going to ask you. Life on your farm can be physical on many days for many tasks that you have. Are you able to handle a certain types of tasks out there, or have you figured out finally how to delegate a little bit of things to maybe a ranch hand or a child or somebody?
No, I am a terrible delegate. I mean, well, on that kind of thing, you want to be able to do. You want to be able to lift up that bucket. You want to be able to pull that 20-pound, that 200-pound tub for feed for the cow. You want to be able to do that. I think I've learned where some of my limitations are because I do it once and then I can't do it for another 2 weeks. But I will tell you, I think that those years, those many years that we all lifted and ran and did what we did, I mean, it lasts. I mean, it stays with you. I mean, I feel like I'm a pretty strong 57-year-old guy, and can do some things that maybe I might not have been able to do. But no, I haven't learned that. I still do stupid stuff and pick up stuff or lift something and do whatever. But you learn from the pain, I guess. But we all fought through so much of that. But I think those of us who went through that kind of fire, that kind of training, I think we all want to still be able to do it. I'm maybe starting to recognize some of the things I can and can't do, but I'll probably get more advice from Anna Jean on what I should and shouldn't do than I give myself. But I do. I've said this to a lot of young people. I think doing it in your 20s and 30s, and it'll stay with you. I mean, it'll stay with you. And I think we're kind of blessed to live out here on the farm and do what we do. It's active. We lift, we carry, we walk. There for a while, I was getting in almost 10,000 steps before I took a shower in the morning. And so, if you can, and I know you walk and you hike, and I've seen you 5+ milers. I mean, if you can keep that kind of active level, I think we can do these things longer. But I really do think the strength training we all did back in those days, it has, at least it's helped me. And I've had a bunch of injuries. I mean, whether it be, coming off a horse or doing something, I mean, between knees and back and neck and different things. But I think that training we did helped us a ton. I think we all benefit even now from it.
You could not be more better descriptive than that. Keep moving your body. I don't have the training or the education that you do, but I have learned to listen and learn from those who do, and including yourself tonight. But I need some advice for the next 2 nights with Seder Wednesday and Thursday night, with Passover holiday coming up, my favorite holiday. We tend to sit around the table and tell the story and recline for a couple, 3 to 4, some more hours. Would you advise some pre-Seder stretching might be in order to get it in there so you don't stove up your back? Or what, do you have any insider tips you want to share as we're getting close to the end?
I hadn't thought about that, but this dear friend of mine, Charles Batt, played tennis at Vanderbilt a few years ahead of us, and went to a wonderful dinner that his father did in London. He was from London, from Wimbledon, England, actually, and went to this wonderful dinner with he and his father. When I was at Vanderbilt at the time, he was just out, and his dad hosted. It must have been 20 some odd people. And we were there, like you say, it wasn't a Seder. It wasn't a Seder, and we didn't sit there maybe 4 or 5 hours. We certainly sat there a long time. And he sat the entire crew, boy, girl, men, women, men and women alternated. And every course, the men had to get up and walk around the table and sit at another seat.
Mhm.
Every course. So maybe that's what we do. Maybe during the Seder tomorrow, you and I will institute this. And around our table, we'll just have everybody get up and switch seats. And so we're going to keep moving, even though we're sitting for 3 or 4 hours. So that's all I got.
Love it.
Because we're going to sit there and drink 4 glasses of wine and talk and
That's
eat
right.
and drink and do whatever. So that's all I got on that one. So
Oh, that's perfect. And that's a great conclusion, Scott, to a fantastic conversation. I want to be respectful of your time and those watching. I want to welcome Steve Loss. Law Dog is in the house.
Law Dog, here he is.
Scott, thank you so much for sharing some of your journey with us tonight. I want to wish you a happy Passover. And those of you out there who celebrate Passover or Easter, I hope you all have a meaningful holiday this week as well. Keep coming back on Tuesday nights.
Take care, y'all. Thank you.
Down.